Okay. Recap really quickly because I forgot to start the recording. If we want to find the distance between 2 points on a coordinate plane, we could just count them if they were vertical, if the points were lined up vertically or the points are lined up horizontally. But if they're not lined up horizontally or vertically, we can't just count the distance between them. So we use the distance formula. So there's a bunch of x's and y's in here. So remember what these points on the coordinate plane have a location, like our points in the number line, their location was the number that they were plotted on. The location for a point on the coordinate plane is an ordered pair, right? So if we're looking at example 1 here, it says calculate the distance between points E, -1, 5, and C, 7, -1. These are the locations, their locations on the coordinate plane. So this is the x-coordinate and the y-coordinate for point E. So if we start at the origin, -1 tells us to go left 1, +5 tells us to go up 5. That's the location of that point. For point C, the coordinate 7, -1 tells us starting at the origin, we go right 7 and down 1, -1. So those, the coordinates, are their location on the coordinate plane. So we can use these x's and y's in this formula. This is the x's from each point, and this is the y coordinates for each point. So if we plug these points into this distance formula, we can plug them in 2 ways. The order doesn't matter here. What matters is the x-coordinate and the y-coordinate have to be in the same spot. The x-coordinate and the y-coordinate have to be in the same spot. So we can plug this into the formula as x minus x, -1 minus 7 squared, plus y minus y, 5 minus -1 squared, or we could swap the order. It doesn't matter. You just have to keep the x's together. So now we could do 7 minus -1 squared. We could use this one first. Plus -1 minus 5 squared. Whichever way you plug that in, as long as you keep the x and y coordinates in the same spot in their parentheses, you get the same answer, the correct answer. Notice it says give an exact answer, not a decimal approximation. So we do need to talk about that. This one is not going to require that. We're going to talk about it. All right, so we're just going to go ahead and simplify from here. So it's going to be equal to, so 7 minus -1. Remember how to do that on your calculator? 7 minus 1 negative equals, and that's going to be 8 squared. And 1 negative minus 5 equals would be -6 squared. That simplifies to 64 plus 36. And we simplify it again to 100. So let me remind you where the square root button is. It's right here to the left of the division symbol. So we got to want to find the square root of 100. It's 100. Square root button, and you don't have to hit the equal sign on that. So the square root of 100 is 10. There's no rounding necessary. That is the exact answer. Okay, so now we know that the distance between those 2 points is 10. Brandon, you have a question? Okay. The next one is going to illustrate the not rounding, but we need to give an exact answer. So we can write all numbers that we can write that as a fraction, we can give it as an exact answer. But any number that we can't write as a fraction, that's an irrational number. If it's a decimal, we would have to round it, right? Or if we got that decimal by taking the square root of something, then we just leave it as the square root. So that's what we're going to talk about next. Brandon, you got 2 more. Good? Okay. All right, so let's look at this example. X and y, we're finding the distance between them. So we're going to use that formula. And I don't usually even write the subscript. You can if you like. I'm just going to make sure I match mine up. And I usually just do left to right. So I'm going to do d equals the square root of x minus x. So 4 minus 9 squared. Plus. Now we're going to do y minus y squared. So negative 9 minus negative 2 squared. And you'll see that in the first spot is 4 and negative 9. That's my first ordered pair. In the second spot are negative 9, negative 2. That's my second ordered pair. Does that make sense to everyone? All right, great. And now we're going to simplify. So 4 minus 9 is negative 5. I'm going to square it. Negative 9 minus negative 2. Remember to put that on your calculator. 9 negative minus 2 negative equals negative 7 squared. So that's going to be, remember your square, let's talk about where your square root button, the square button is here next to the square root button. So if we're squaring 5, it's 5 negative and hit the square root button, and that's 25. 7 negative, hit the square button, not the square root button, and it's 49. So that's 25 plus 49, which I'm pretty sure is 74. Right? All right, so now everybody find the square root of 74. Everybody clear it out 3 times. It's 74 and the square root button. Right. So this is a decimal. If you're not sure if it can be written as a fraction, then hit second and fraction the decimal button. You notice it doesn't change because this can't be written as a fraction. This is a non-repeating, non-terminating decimal. The only way to write it as a decimal is if we round it. So we're not going to do that. We're going to leave it just like that. That's the only way to get that as an exact answer. Now, if they ask you to round, you round to whatever spot they tell you to round to. If they don't ask you to round, you leave it as a simplified radical. It does. It is. Any questions for me? So the square root of 74 is 8.6 something, right? So that's how far apart those are. These are 10 apart, right? The next thing we're going to talk about are how to find the midpoint. So if we draw a segment with 2 endpoints, how can we find the middle point, right? We said the midpoint is the same as the middle point. We have to know that what point is the same distance from A as it is from B. That would be the middle of this line segment, right? On the number line, we just add the 2 numbers together and divide by 2, right? But on the coordinate plane, we have to find the midpoint of the x-coordinate and the y-coordinate to have the midpoint of those 2 points. So this is the formula for that. once again, those x's and y's in that formula refer to the x-coordinates and the y-coordinates of the midpoint and of the endpoint. So this is the midpoint here. This would be what we think of as our answer here, right? These two, we use the coordinates from the endpoint here. So this side is where we put coordinates for the endpoint. This side is where we put coordinates for the midpoint. If they ask us to find the midpoint of M, we're looking for this. So our midpoint is going to be M, but we need the ordered pair for that, equals, and now we're looking at our x and y coordinates. So x plus x divided by 2, so x plus x divided by 2, I don't know why I thought it was going on like that, I don't know that. This. 4 plus negative 8 divided by 2, and that's the x-coordinate for the midpoint. So that's 4 plus negative 8, negative 4 divided by 2, which is negative 2. That is our x-coordinate of the midpoint. Let's go ahead and close your Chromebook up. To find our y-coordinate of our midpoint, we're going to look at the y's. Y plus y, 7 plus negative 1 divided by 2. So that's going to be 6 over 2, which is 3. And that is our y-coordinate. So we're just going to approximate where that is on here. That's about 2. That's about 3. So left 2, up 3. We're just approximating where that looks close. My tick marks are not accurate. But we're going to use our imagination. Those two sections would be congruent if that's the midpoint, okay? But this is the correct order pair. This is the answer to that question. Let me show you where to go to find that reference sheet. We're going to go to our home page. And that is the reference sheet right there. Here's that one. That's your syllabus. So we're going to go to the reference sheet. And you'll see the distance formula here and the midpoint formula here. And so on your homework, you can use the formula from your notes. Or you could, if you don't have your notes for some reason, you can pull up the reference sheet. When we take a test on this, I will give you a copy of this reference sheet, and you just go to where you need to go to find it. All right, so you don't have to memorize the formula, but you do need to practice using it. You need to know how to use it correctly. Any questions? Okay. Let's do the next one. So we're still finding the midpoint. And so we're going to find the midpoint of the x-coordinate by using the x-coordinates from each point. So S is negative 1, 4. T is negative 5, negative 6. What is the midpoint between those? Should be somewhere in here, right? So let's do the math. X plus x, negative 1 plus negative 5 divided by 2. Negative 1 plus negative 5 divided by 2 is negative 6 divided by 2, or negative 3. Now we're going to find our y-coordinate by using the y. y plus y, 4 plus negative 6, always divided by 2. If you want to find half of something, you divide by 2, right? The middle point is halfway between those 2 points. 4 plus negative 6 is negative 2, divided by positive 2 is negative 1. So that is the midpoint is ordered pair. So left about 3 and up about 1. Nope, that's not right. Down 1. So left 3 and down 1 is about right there. That was closer to the midpoint than my last estimation. But we know that these two parts of that segment are congruent. Okay? Just like with any formula that you're plugging in, you can plug in different variables. We can use this formula not to just solve for the midpoint, but if we know the midpoint and one of the endpoints, we can also solve for the other endpoint. And so that's the other way we have to be able to use this formula. Y'all kind of with me? Okay. So we kind of work this backwards. We know what the midpoint is already. And so we're going to plug that in. So the midpoint coordinates, x and y, the endpoint coordinates, x and y. So we know that this coordinate is the equals negative 3. It's going to equal the sum of the two x coordinates divided by 2. So when I do this one, let's do this. Let's do x of m, and it's going to be equal to x plus x divided by 2, right? So this is x of m right here. That is the x coordinate of the midpoint. Does that make sense to everyone? So that's what we found over here. That would be that x coordinate. We're going to do this in two. We kind of did this all together like an ordered pair. But it's too confusing to do that when we're working backwards. So we're going to make two equations, one for the x coordinate of the midpoint. So m is going to be equal to an x coordinate and a y coordinate. And so the x coordinate, the midpoint we know is negative 3. We don't know what this order pair is for this point D. That's the other endpoint. So we're looking for the x coordinate there, so that's going to be our variable. The other endpoint here, its x coordinate is negative 8. And we're going to divide by 2. We know some number plus negative 8 divided by 2 equals the midpoint. So when we've given the midpoint and finding the endpoint, once we get here, we always do the same thing. We always multiply both sides by 2. And that simplifies those. Leaves us x plus negative 8. Add 8 to both sides, and 2 equals x. Normally I would flip that around, but I'm going to put it in my ordered pair, so I'm not going to worry about that. So that is, one reason to use a pencil on my class, I put the wrong thing. This is endpoint D we're finding. We already know the midpoint. This is what we're finding, point D. And so now we've got to find the y coordinate. Does anybody have questions on how we found the x coordinate? Okay, so now we're going to we're going to use this formula. And this is the y coordinate. So 0 equals, now we want to know what is the y for D, so y plus the y for C. And then divide by 2. Multiply both sides by 2. 0 equals, that's 2 plus 1, y plus negative 7. Does everybody know how we got there? No? Okay. So this was the y coordinate for the midpoint, right? We know it has to equal this y plus this y divided by 2. That's what our formula tells us over here. by 2, right, Erin? Okay. Now, if we know this already, one of these is going to be our variable. Okay, so let's look at our question. So this is our y, it goes here. Okay? Now, the y we're looking for in point D is going to be what we're solving for. That's what we don't know, so we've assigned that variable. Okay? We do know the y for the other endpoint. Does that make sense? And so we plug it in here. But the formula for finding the midpoint is add the 2 coordinates and divide by 2. Okay? So once we get to this point, now we multiply both sides by 2. 0 times 2 is 0. Right? And if we multiply these by 2, then these simplify to just 1. So we get to not mess with that anymore. So we're all done with that. So now we have 0 equals y plus negative 7. Any better? Okay. Taking you good? 2 for 1. I like it. All right. And now we solve this one-step equation. We need to add 7 to both sides. So 7 equals y. Normally I'd swap it around, but that is my y coordinate here. So this ordered pair we know as 2, 7. Any questions? One more? We're going to call that x sub m and that y sub m. I don't think we labeled that the last time, but maybe that'll make it a little clearer. So x sub m equals x plus x divided by 2. X sub y equals y plus y divided by 2. So where these are the endpoints, right? The x coordinates the endpoint. So x sub m is 2. We don't know this x, so that's our x point here for point T. So we're looking for that ordered pair. So we're going to call its x coordinate what we don't know, x, and the x coordinate of the other endpoint here is negative 4. And it's always divided by 2. Does that make sense, Billy? Do you know how we got there? Josie, does that make sense? Miriam, does that make sense? Okay. So now we're going to solve the equation. We're always going to multiply by 2. 4 equals, those are always going to simplify to 1. And we're solving that equation. 8 equals x. So I'm going to put 8 in the x spot. Now we're going to do the same thing here. I need the y coordinate of the midpoint. So what we don't know is the y here. So that's going to be our variable. The y that we do know right here is 2. I'm going to divide by 2. Multiplying both sides by 2 to solve the equation. Negative 4 equals y plus 2. Start 2 from both sides. Negative 6 equals y. We don't have to flop it around because it's got to go in our ordered pair anyway. So this ordered pair is 8, negative 6. Any questions? So we're going to scan and submit our notes real quick. We're going to scan and submit our notes. Then we're going to go to the assignment. In ours, it's 1-7. The first we're going to scan and submit our notes. Nope, we're going to turn it to. Well, do what happens if you first. What's your phone? Don't need a pass. minute, you drop your phone back in your backpack. Is anybody going to go back to another slide? Your phone was just canceled. Once you finish this, drop your phone back there in your backpack. Alright, so phones should be getting to the right pretty quick, so not put away yet. And pencil and paper out while you do your assignment. Don't pack up until 23, so we got over 10 minutes to work from here. Miriam? I have a charger. Do you have a charger? Is that what charger is? Do you have a bad one? Alright, well, let's use you guys off to get one. I mean, I have one, but if you haven't got one, I have like, but they didn't do it. Alright, well, why don't you just, just let me give you a passage in front office so you got everything you're supposed to have, okay? Oh, turn the recording off.